It seems like everywhere you turn these days, everyone's talking about AI,
Yeah,
especially those large language models.
it's true.
It's not science fiction anymore, is it?
Not at all.
They're really changing so much of how we live and work and communicate.
Hmm.
And now even governments are getting in on the action,
Yeah, as AI gets more sophisticated and more influential,
right?
we're really seeing this interesting trend where countries are deciding to build their own large language models.
Yeah, and when you send over these sources, I was really struck by how much this is happening all over the world.
It's a global phenomenon.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
We've got this fantastic report here that really digs into all the different angles.
Yeah.
It looks at why this is happening, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are,
Hmm.
and then we've got all this information on what specific countries are actually doing.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack this whole idea of sovereign LLMs.
Okay.
So we'll be looking at what exactly that means, why countries are investing in these things, how they're actually going about building them, and what the whole regulatory landscape looks like.
Sounds good.
So consider this your crash course on sovereign LLMs.
I like it.
Now, one of the things that really jumped out at me from this report
Okay.
is how many countries see these LLMs as a way to
Yeah.
make their governments work better, just operate more efficiently.
It's about improving efficiency on a national scale.
Exactly.
And it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Governments deal with a ton of information and process.
Huge amounts of data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So using AI to streamline all of that can really make a difference.
Okay, so what are some specific examples of this?
Well, take Albania and Serbia, for example.
Oh, okay.
They're using LLMs to deal with all those legal documents.
Okay.
Legal systems generate a ton of text.
Right.
So using AI to help manage, organize, analyze all of that,
That's got to be a big help.
huge time saver.
Yeah.
Could even save money in the long run.
Interesting. So they're focusing on the legal side of things.
Yeah. What about other countries?
Well, the Netherlands is doing something really interesting.
Okay.
They're looking at how these LLMs can make government communication better.
Makes sense.
Making information clearer and easier for people to access.
It's all about transparency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can lead to better civic engagement.
Interesting. So different approaches, but the same underlying goal,
Yeah,
making government more effective.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, we see Albania pop up again.
Okay.
This time they're using LLMs for public procurement
Okay.
and even for legal translations, which can be a pretty complex process.
Right.
So again, streamlining things, potentially saving money.
Okay, so legal stuff, procurement, translations, all areas where these models can really make a difference.
It's about making those complex processes more efficient.
Got it.
And then you have Nigeria looking at how LLMs could help with agricultural advisory services.
So that's more about providing support to farmers
Exactly, giving them the information they need.
to make better decisions.
Interesting.
And North Macedonia is using an AI assistant called ADA to provide specific information on state aid programs.
So sort of like an AI helper.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's all about making it easier for people to access those programs.
Okay, so we've got all these examples of efficiency.
Mm,
Are there other big reasons why countries are going this route?
absolutely. Data protection is a huge factor.
Of course, yeah,
It's a big concern these days,
for sure.
and a lot of countries are turning to sovereign LLMs to address that.
Makes sense.
Take Bulgaria, for instance. They've developed their own model called BGGPT.
Okay.
And a key feature of that model is that all the data stays within Bulgaria.
So they have complete control over it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense with all the worries about data breaches and privacy.
Absolutely.
So data protection is a big one. What about national security?
That's another big one.
Right, because governments are going to be very careful about
Yeah.
where sensitive information is processed.
Absolutely. And we see that reflected in projects like the U.S. Defense Law,
Right.
which is designed to operate in a completely government-controlled environment.
So that was built by Scale AI.
That's right.
Okay.
It highlights how important it is to have secure AI for defense purposes.
Right. So efficiency, data protection, national security, all big drivers.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Well, there's also the issue of international competitiveness.
Okay.
Countries want to be leaders in AI,
Of course.
and they realize that having their own LLMs can give them an edge.
Okay. How so?
Well, research has shown that national LLMs can actually outperform global models.
Really?
Yeah, especially on benchmarks that are specific to a local language or culture.
So it's not just about having the biggest model.
Not necessarily.
It's also about having a model that's tailored to your specific needs.
Exactly.
Interesting.
The report mentions Brazil and Albania as examples of this.
Okay.
They've shown that a more focused approach can actually yield better results.
That's really interesting. You might think that the
Yeah.
bigger global models would always be superior, but it seems like that local focus can really pay off.
It can.
Is that purely down to the training data being more relevant, or are there...
It's mainly the training data.
Okay.
If you train a model on tons of local data,
Right.
it's naturally going to have a better understanding of those nuances,
Of course, yeah.
those idioms, those specific entities that are relevant to that region.
Yeah, it's all about context.
Exactly.
So local relevance, better performance, that all ties into this broader idea of...
Strategic autonomy.
Right, countries wanting to be more independent.
Yeah, they want to reduce their reliance on foreign technologies. They want to boost their own research capabilities,
Right.
encourage innovation within their own borders.
So sovereign LLMs are part of that bigger picture.
Exactly. They're a key element of that independence.
And of course, we can't forget the ethical and legal considerations.
Very important.
Right, because these are powerful tools,
They are.
and we need to make sure they're being used responsibly.
Absolutely. And developing national LLMs gives countries more control over that.
Okay.
They can ensure that these models align with their own values and principles.
Makes sense.
They can implement the data protection measures that meet their national standards,
Right.
and they can establish their own oversight mechanisms.
So it's about building trust and accountability.
Exactly. It's about more than just the technology itself.
Right, it's about the whole ecosystem around it.
Precisely.
And of course, none of this is possible without the infrastructure.
You need serious computing power to develop these models.
That's right.
We're talking supercomputers, extensive cloud computing resources.
And we're seeing countries investing heavily in this.
Yeah, we see big investments in supercomputing facilities in places like India, Brazil, Israel,
Okay.
and the Euro HPC program is also playing a vital role in expanding access to that kind of power across Europe.
So Euro HPC, that's all about high-performance computing.
Exactly. It's a major European initiative.
Right, because you can't just create these LLMs out of thin air.
No, you need the computational muscle to back it up.
Yeah, and speaking of essential ingredients, data accessibility is another huge piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. You need massive amounts of data to train these models.
And different countries are taking different approaches to that.
Yeah, some are really pushing open data.
Okay.
Like Japan, they're promoting open data platforms, making it easier for people to access and use government data,
Interesting.
while others are focusing on regulation.
Okay. Like who?
Well, Saudi Arabia is a good example.
Okay.
They're putting in place regulations around data exchange and usage.
So it's about finding that balance between
Yeah,
making data accessible, but also protecting it.
exactly. And initiatives like Horizon Europe and Clarin are also providing crucial funding
Okay.
for all sorts of data-related projects.
So it's a multifaceted challenge, this whole data question.
It really is.
Yeah. Now, another thing that really struck me is how geopolitical considerations are also shaping this whole sovereign LLM landscape.
Absolutely. It's not just about technology.
Right.
It's also about power, about influence,
Yeah.
about how countries see themselves in the world.
So how does that play out in practice?
Well, we see countries like China and Brazil
Okay.
viewing these models as tools for managing information flows,
Okay.
maintaining social stability, even preserving their national narratives.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they see these models as a way to shape the information landscape
Okay.
and to promote their own values and perspectives.
So it's about controlling the narrative.
In a way, yes.
Interesting.
China's approach of ensuring oversight aligns with their socialist ideology,
Right.
and Brazil's focus on internal security also reflects this trend.
So it's a really complex interplay of technology and politics.
It is.
Yeah. And then you have this whole aspect of cultural identity and language.
Yeah, that's a fascinating dimension of this.
Right, because language is so central to culture. And these LLMs, they have the potential to either preserve or potentially erode those cultural nuances.
That's right, and we see examples of both.
So on the preservation side, what are we seeing?
Well, AI-21 Labs in Israel is a great example.
Okay.
They specifically incorporated Hebrew into their models.
Interesting.
And that wasn't just a commercial decision.
Right.
It was a statement about the importance of their language and their culture.
So it was about representation.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about the other side of the coin, the potential risks?
Well, there's a concern that if we only rely on a handful of global models
Right.
trained on data from dominant languages,
Okay.
That could lead to the marginalization of smaller languages.
It's like a digital form of linguistic imperialism.
In a way, yes.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
And that's why we see countries in regions like Latin America and Southeast Asia
Okay.
focusing on developing their own LLMs.
Right, so it's about addressing those specific market needs.
Exactly. Those needs that the global tech giants might not be fully catering to.
Right, it's about tailoring solutions to local languages and cultures.
Precisely.
And sometimes it's about learning from past mistakes.
Yeah, realizing that previous approaches haven't worked.
Right. Can you give us an example of that?
Well, Argentina is a good case study.
Okay.
They initially had quite restrictive data regulations,
Okay.
which ended up hindering their AI development.
So they realized they needed to be more open.
Exactly. They shifted towards a more open data policy
Okay.
and started actively trying to attract foreign investment.
So it was a course correction.
It was.
Interesting.
And South Korea also provides a valuable lesson here.
Okay.
They realized they were facing data scarcity
Right.
and that their regulations were too restrictive,
Okay.
which was preventing them from developing a strong Korean language model.
So they had to adjust their strategy.
They did. They ended up focusing on creating more efficient, smaller scale models.
Okay, so the key takeaway here is that it's a process of continuous learning and adaptation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've spent some time understanding why countries are pursuing these sovereign LLMs. Let's delve into how they're actually being used in different sectors.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, the potential applications seem vast.
They are. We're just scratching the surface, really.
Right, so where are we seeing the most activity?
Well, in education, we've already talked about BGGPT.
Right, Bulgaria's model.
Exactly.
But that's just one example, right?
Yeah, there are many others.
Okay, so beyond education, where else are these models making an impact?
Well, e-governance is a big one.
E-governance, so that's using technology to improve government services.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we see a lot of interesting examples of this.
Like what?
Well, Albania seems to be really leading the way
Okay.
with their virtual assistants.
Okay, tell us more about that.
So these are AI-powered tools that are integrated into their digital government portal, and they help automate access to a wide range of documents and public services.
So it's about making things easier and faster for citizens.
Exactly. It's about making government more accessible.
Interesting.
And Prime Minister Edi Rama has even talked about using AI to replace
Oh.
a significant portion of services across different levels of government.
So he's really embracing the potential of AI.
He is. He sees it as a way to combat corruption,
Right.
to improve efficiency, to make government more transparent.
That's ambitious.
It is. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. What about other examples of e-governance?
Well, Serbia's Comtext SR model is another interesting one.
Okay, what's that all about?
So this model is specifically designed to analyze legal documents
Okay.
that are related to EU integration.
Ah, so it's a very targeted application.
It is. It's all about supporting their political and economic goals.
Interesting. And what about North Macedonia?
Well, we talked about their ADA assistant earlier.
Right, the AI helper for state aid programs.
Exactly. It's another great example of using LLMs
Right.
to provide citizens with easy access to information about government services.
Okay, so making it easier for people to interact with their governments seems to be a major theme here.
It is, and it's not just about efficiency.
Right.
It's also about addressing broader societal challenges.
Okay, like what?
Well, Sweden is looking at how generative AI can help with the challenges of an aging population.
Okay.
They're particularly focused on using it for text-heavy tasks in the public sector,
Interesting.
where they might be facing workforce reductions.
So it's about finding ways to augment human capabilities.
Exactly, to fill those gaps that might emerge.
Okay, so e-governance, aging populations, what other sectors are being impacted?
Well, in agriculture, we see Tunisia's Agranti model,
Okay.
which has been trained on crop genomes.
So it's being used for agricultural research.
Exactly. It's helping to automate the study of crops.
And that can have implications for food security and all sorts of things. Interesting. So from government services to agriculture, these LLMs are really versatile.
They are. We're seeing applications across a wide range of fields.
And what about healthcare?
Healthcare is another area where there's huge potential.
Okay.
We've already talked about Kenya's Eliza Lama.
Right, the medical advice chatbot.
Exactly.
But there are other examples too, right?
Yeah. The Holland Hospital Group in Sweden is testing GPTSW3.
GPTSW3.
For all sorts of tasks, like summarizing medical records, predicting adverse events, even drafting discharge summaries.
So it's like an AI assistant for healthcare professionals.
It is, and it could really free up their time.
Right, so they can focus on the more human aspects of care.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really promising.
It is, but of course, it's essential to have that human oversight.
Absolutely, you can't just hand over everything to the AI.
No, it's about finding the right balance.
And what about national security? We talked about that earlier in terms of data protection.
Right. Well, it's also about ensuring that those critical systems are secure and that they're not vulnerable to attacks or manipulation.
Right, so sovereign LLMs can play a role in that as well.
Absolutely, because by building and controlling their own models,
Right.
governments can minimize those risks.
Okay, what are some specific examples of that?
Well, we see Belgium's BGGPT,
Okay.
Albania's virtual assistant,
Uh-huh.
and Germany's Aleph Alpha with their Fairy AI project,
Okay.
all emphasizing the importance of data control and security.
So it's about knowing where your data is and who has access to it.
Exactly.
And in the realm of national defense, these applications are becoming increasingly sophisticated.
They are. We're seeing a lot of interest in using LLMs for things like
Yeah.
wargaming simulations, automating the analysis of intelligence data,
Oh.
even for streamlining military communications.
So it's a whole new frontier for AI.
It is.
And even NATO is starting to pay attention.
Yeah, they're actively assessing both the risks and the opportunities of using LLMs in military contexts.
Makes sense.
It's a powerful technology with far-reaching implications.
It is. So what are some specific examples of how militaries are using these models?
Well, the U.S. Task Force Lima has reportedly identified over 180
Wow.
different use cases for generative AI in military operations.
180, that's incredible.
It is. It shows the sheer breadth of potential applications.
Yeah, and the U.S. Air Force is already using LLMs for things like wargaming simulations and automating the summarization of complex reports. So they're really putting this technology to work.
They are, and China is doing the same with their chatbot model,
ChatBot. Okay.
which is based on Meta's LMA,
Okay.
and they're using it for open source intelligence.
Right. Analyzing publicly available information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also for improving their military communications.
So it's a global trend, this military adoption of LLMs.
It is.
And of course, all of this points to the potential economic impact.
Yeah, AI is poised to transform the global economy.
Right. And LLMs are a big part of that.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the key projections here?
Well, one study estimates that the Asia-Pacific region could see a $3 trillion boost
Wow. $3 trillion.
to its economy by 2030 through the adoption of AI technologies.
That's enormous.
It is. And a big chunk of that growth is expected to come from LLMs.
Interesting. And within the Asia-Pacific region, are there any standout countries?
Yeah, Singapore is expected to benefit significantly,
Okay.
potentially adding $147.6 billion to its economy by 2030.
Wow. And what's driving that growth?
Well, a key factor is the availability of skilled AI professionals.
So they're really investing in their workforce.
They are. They recognize that talent is crucial to success in AI.
Okay, so Asia-Pacific is looking at huge potential gains. What about other regions?
Well, Europe is also anticipating substantial economic benefits.
Okay.
One study estimates a contribution of $600 billion by 2030.
Okay, so that's a bit lower than the Asia-Pacific projection, but still a significant amount.
It is, but the report also highlights some challenges for Europe.
Okay, like what?
Well, they need to foster more innovation. They need to address the skills gap.
Of course, yeah.
And they need to ensure that businesses of all sizes have access to the necessary technology.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the whole ecosystem around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Thailand is also quite optimistic.
Okay.
They're projecting a potential 6% increase in their GDP by 2030 through AI adoption.
6%? That's pretty substantial.
It is, but a survey of their SMEs,
SMEs, so those are small and medium-sized enterprises.
that's right,
Yeah, okay.
revealed some significant challenges.
Okay, like what?
Well, access to skilled personnel is a big one.
Of course, that's a recurring theme.
It is, and then there's the cost of implementing AI.
Right, that can be a barrier for smaller businesses.
It can, and then there's the challenge of even understanding
Yeah.
how to evaluate and select the right AI solutions.
So it's not as simple as just buying some software.
No, it requires a certain level of understanding and expertise.
Right, so a lot of potential, but also some significant hurdles to overcome.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored why countries are so interested in sovereign LLMs, and we're starting to see where they're being applied.
Yeah.
Now let's dig into how countries are actually going about developing these models.
Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts.
Right, because it's a pretty complex process, isn't it?
It is. It's not something you can just whip up overnight.
So what are the essential steps involved?
Well, first and foremost, you need data,
Data, of
and
course.
lots of it.
Right, and not just any data, right?
No, it needs to be carefully curated,
Okay.
cleaned, pre-processed.
So it's a lot of work just getting the data ready.
It is. It's a crucial step.
Okay, what else?
Well, then you need the computational power.
Right, the supercomputers we were talking about.
Exactly. Or extensive cloud computing resources.
Okay, so data and computing power.
Mhm.
What else is essential?
The human expertise.
Of course, you need the people who know how to build these things.
Exactly. You need skilled data engineers, machine learning specialists,
Right.
a whole team of researchers and developers.
So it's a really specialized area.
It is. It requires a lot of talent and experience.
And all of this development often takes place within the framework of national AI strategies.
Right. These strategies set the stage.
Yeah.
They outline the priorities, the goals, the overall vision for AI development.
So what are some examples of these national strategies?
Well, Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 is a good one.
Okay.
It's a broad plan to diversify their economy,
Okay.
and technology is a big part of that.
Right.
And within that vision, they've placed a strong emphasis on AI.
Okay.
They see it as a key driver of future growth.
So they're really embracing AI as a strategic industry.
They are. And then you have Israel,
Okay.
which has always been a hub for innovation.
Right. The startup nation.
Exactly. And they've really doubled down on that in the AI space.
So they're focused on fostering AI startups.
Yeah, they're providing funding, support, creating a whole ecosystem.
Interesting.
And then you have countries like China and Brazil, which are placing a strong emphasis on national security and technological independence.
So it's about building their own capabilities.
Exactly. They don't want to be reliant on other countries for this critical technology.
Makes sense, especially in areas like defense and intelligence.
Absolutely.
Okay, so different countries, different priorities,
Right.
but all recognizing the strategic importance of AI.
Right. And some countries are also making sure to align their national strategies
Yeah.
with international guidelines.
Okay, like what?
Well, the Netherlands is a good example.
Okay.
They're aligning their AI strategy with the EU AI Act.
So that's the proposed legislation from the EU.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Turkey's aligning their strategy with the G20 principles on AI.
Interesting. So it's about finding that balance between
Yeah.
national interests and international cooperation.
Exactly. And it also helps to ensure that their AI development is responsible and ethical.
Right, because those are global concerns.
They are. And as we saw earlier with Argentina and South Korea, these national strategies aren't set in stone.
Right, they need to be flexible.
They do. They need to be regularly reviewed and revised.
So it's an iterative process.
It is. The technology is constantly evolving.
Right.
And so are the challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, so it's all about adapting and staying ahead of the curve.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to get a more concrete picture of how all these elements come together,
Yeah.
let's look at a specific example.
Okay, a case study.
Exactly. And a really fascinating one is Japan's Fugaku LLM.
Ah, that's a great example.
It's a large-scale collaborative project
Mhm.
with heavy state funding.
Yeah, it really showcases the kind of effort that goes into building these models.
So tell us more about it. How was it structured?
Well, you had the Tokyo Institute of Technology leading the way.
Okay.
They were responsible for the overall architecture of the model.
Okay.
Then you had Tohoku University handling all the massive data processing tasks.
Right, because that's a huge undertaking in itself.
It is. And then Fujitsu came in and provided the computational framework.
Okay.
Riken oversaw the distributed training across their Fugaku supercomputer.
So they were leveraging their supercomputing infrastructure.
Exactly. And then Nagoya University was exploring the potential scientific applications.
Okay.
CyberAgent contributed a wealth of Japanese language data.
Okay.
And Kotoba Technologies adapted the deep learning frameworks
Okay.
to run efficiently on Fugaku.
Wow, so it was a truly collaborative effort.
It was. It brought together expertise from all these different institutions.
Yeah, and with a clear national goal in mind.
Exactly, to build a powerful Japanese language model.
That's impressive.
And other countries are adopting different organizational models
Okay.
for their state-funded LLM initiatives.
So what are some other approaches?
Well, the Netherlands GPT-NL is a good example.
Okay.
It's a collaboration between three key government-connected nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
TNO, which brings the AI research expertise,
Okay.
NFI, which focuses on the ethical use of AI, and SRARF, which provides the infrastructure.
So a different model, but again, a collaborative one.
Exactly. And Sweden's GPT-SW3 project,
GBTSW3.
okay, was led by AI Sweden,
Okay.
which is their National Center for Applied AI,
Okay.
with contributions from RISE, a research institute, and Wara, which focused on the media and language aspects.
Okay.
And then you have Saudi Arabia's Alam model,
Alum. Okay.
which was developed by their Saudi Data and AI Authority, SDAIA.
SDAIA. Okay.
But even that involved the collaboration of over 400 experts
Wow.
and 160 different government organizations.
So it was a truly national effort.
It was. They really mobilized their resources to build that model.
Yeah. So these large-scale government-backed collaborations are clearly a major driving force.
They are, but we're also seeing a lot of activity in the private sector.
Right, because businesses are also recognizing the potential of LLMs.
Absolutely. And they're often focusing on languages with large numbers of speakers
Okay.
and clear commercial potential.
Makes sense. They're looking for markets where they can make a profit.
Exactly. And we're seeing a variety of approaches here.
Okay. Like what?
Well, some companies are going fully open source,
Okay.
making their models freely available to anyone,
Interesting.
while others are offering access through APIs.
Okay, so that's like a pay-as-you-go model.
Exactly. You pay for the computing power you use.
Right.
And then there are platform-based solutions
Huh.
where you basically subscribe to a service.
Okay, so different business models emerging.
Yeah, it's still early days, but we're starting to see the landscape take shape.
So what are some examples of successful private sector initiatives?
Well, Brazil's Sabia models are a good example.
Sabia. Okay.
They were developed by a company called Maritaka AI.